How are you, man? I'm Gil Roth, and you're listening to a bonus episode of my Virtual Memories Show podcast. This is a COVID check-in episode where I record with a past guest of the Virtual Memories Show to find out how they're holding up during the pandemic. As far as how I'm doing okay. It's a kind of foggy and humid morning, and I've got to get out for a run after this. So my personal forecast calls for clamminess, which is bleh, but I'll deal. I eased back into work yesterday, first day after the Memorial Day weekend, which meant a break from all the reading and zine work I'd been doing all weekend, which kind of preyed on me. I don't want to lose momentum on that stuff, but I did concede yesterday that I can wait until this weekend for a pal to get me a logo for the first issue. I don't need to rush everything out to the printer tomorrow. After putting it off for so long through my own anxieties, inertia, etc., there's no need to rush and screw things up right now. Plus, I need to come up with 2 more pages, but I think I've come up with a really good mini essay and a photo that I can use to kind of round out the issue with that. Anyway, let's get to today's show. Annie Koyama is joining me from Toronto. Annie publishes comics and other books through Koyama Press. We talked last fall at the Small Press Expo, or SPX, about her decision to shut down Koyama Press in 2021 after almost 15 years in operation, and how she's put together a grant program for creative people in its stead. Part of that conversation was about how she's made the most of life after getting and surviving a terminal diagnosis many years ago. So I was interested in finding out how she's coping with the constraints of pandemic life, how it may or may not have affected her thoughts about shutting down the press, what's next, and, as far as caveats go, there's not a ton. It's a little echoey. I did a lot of talking this episode, but sometimes I need that. Anyway, here's me and Annie. How are you dealing? How are you handling things at this point?
I'm a person who, when I've been in an emergency situation, deals really, really well with it, and then maybe, walks around with that for years. But what I've realized about myself is, boy, oh boy, do I not like uncertainty.
Yeah. That was a big part of yesterday's conversation, was that what that cloud does to you, that complete, we just, not even, not knowing what's ahead, but not even being able to survey the current landscape because you don't know what's real, what's not.
And how long it's going on for.
Yeah.
If you knew there was an end, you could deal a little better. I think I certainly could, but I like to be able to plan, and when you can't plan, it's pretty frustrating.
Yeah. Do you envision moments like just what it would be like to be back the way things were? It's just in the middle of the night. Last night I had this. How weird is it going to be just like shaking someone's hand or giving someone a hug? Like just the sheer strangeness of that. Has that hit you, or you approaching it in different directions?
I watch a lot of movies for escapism, even when, there is no pandemic. And when I see crowd scenes now in a film, I feel like my shoulders tense up. It's like, no, get away. And
people realize?
Yeah, it's a visceral thing. When I go out, I have the added stress of living in a big city, which is touted for how multicultural we are, which is true. However, the amount of racism that exists is a lot higher because of that. And so there have been a lot of actual physical attacks. I've been taunted all my life with racist, verbal slurs, but the fear of going out with a mask on and, being Asian it's a little scary, even when you're going 2 blocks over to the drugstore and having to stand in line for an hour. I just pretend I'm in the old Soviet Union lining up for bread. And then it's not as bad.
Yeah, how's Toronto been? Notwithstanding potential racist attacks, but just how's the pandemic been treated what's the vibe in Toronto?
It, I feel like it changed. The news changes daily, and I have to go out for a little walk, or I'm going to go insane. I live in a condo. It's not the smallest condo, but it's not the biggest condo, and there are two A types residing in it right now who normally are often not there at the same time, and so that's been a pretty big adjustment. So even more reason to get out, even for a quick 10-minute a walk. But the stress of having to avoid people and people not spacing out and thinking wearing masks is, for pussies, that kind of thing certainly exists. I live in the entertainment district, and so it's, at the best of times, it's rife with perhaps people who are maybe a little less considerate.
I was going to say people who think they're immortal or don't care about other people not
sure,
being
there
immortal.
is that. I mean, we all think we are when we're younger, but, just just people who, I'm pretty sure they're probably selfish when they go home too.
Yeah, understood. How's your mom and family?
Yeah, my
dealing?
mom is 92-year-old. She's in a retirement home that thankfully has not been touched by COVID. It's a pretty big home, and she gets quite good care, but she has dementia, and it's pretty bad. And not being able to see her it's been pretty hard for a couple months. And I actually believe that some old people do die of loneliness, and of course that's a little bit of a fear. She's pretty self-sufficient, but and I call her every day, but of course she doesn't remember day to day that I've called, and so she will say things like, oh gee, I wish people would call me. No one's calling me. You can't berate her, but anyway.
To be honest, as the son of a Jewish mother, even without the dementia thing, they'll still play that card. So that's just the standard mom thing. So they may play it off. Oh no, I just didn't remember you called, but yeah, they always give you the needle. So, but have you guys? Is there the standard policy of not being able to visit people in homes like that?
Correct.
We have that in the U.S. I just want to make sure it's the same thing there. So.
Yes, and there have been actual COVID outbreaks in a few of the long-term care homes. And my brother's partner's father passed away about a week ago in one of those notorious homes where you can't see them, you can't go to a funeral, you can't say goodbye. What if they have dementia or something and they don't even know? Maybe that's a little better. I don't know. It's pretty tough for the family, though. So, I guess most families now have been touched by it somehow.
Yeah, it's well, again, just so far beyond anything we could have, even intellectually knowing, like thinking of what the numbers were, we still, I don't think, could have grasped, the real impact, what it actually meant, as opposed to what the numbers signify. But to get off the depressing stuff, tell me about Koyama Cares.
Oh,
tell me what you're doing.
Yeah, Koyama Press Provides was a sort of makeshift name. I am having winding down the press next year, but as a segue into that, for what I'm going to be doing in the future, provided after this unexpected drain on the resources, I can still do it. I wanted to do some kind of monthly grant or giveaway for this whole year. So, just a nice thing. It was more for positive stuff. There was too much social media and negativity I was finding, so I thought it would be a nice thing to post about them. I have been doing this for years. I just haven't been talking about it publicly. So
yeah, I think Kyler spilled the beans just about help from you over the years during our conversation, but I thought that'll slide under the radar. So
sure, and that's fine. But yeah, I think it's a nice thing. I've reached out to over 100 people since March 13th. A lot of people can't pay their rent. Some are having even worse trouble because they've lost all their income, freelance income, plus their day job, which are generally service jobs, are gone. So, fired with no promise of being rehired at coffee shops or, one-off little mom and pop places. Those places may never reopen. So, while I complain about not liking uncertainty, I'm not those people. Certainly the press will take a huge hit, And that's worrisome, and it does keep me up at night because I have commitments to the people who work for me. But, and of course, I feel badly for the people in our last year of publishing, though it's not my fault that the pandemic happened. The sales of books obviously are taking a bit of a dip, and I didn't count on that. So,
no, but that's no one's going to blame you, on that side of thing. But it still hurts. I know.
Yeah,
it
hurts, and I feel badly. So I'm trying to mitigate that. I have a plan.
Yeah, I just couldn't imagine being, like a first-time author, cartoonist, whatever, having your first book and just this, coming down on top of you. Yeah, you can write it off as, well, everybody's going through the same thing, but, to know how much you invest into these sorts of things. Now, tell me about, does this situation impact the timeline at all for winding down the press? Or is it, again, pretty much still going on schedule?
No, because, I had to plan, 2 years ago. So the last books have been printed and are out. But of course, I'm selling them until the end of this year, and then it'll take me 6 months till probably July next year to wrap up the paperwork on the press. You have to wait for returns and that kind of thing to come in months and months and months after. So I won't be able to actually pay out the final royalties till probably next June, and then I can move on to my next thing.
Yes, which we're eagerly awaiting, but we figure. You've got time and planning, so
yeah, it'll be more of the same of what I'm actually doing.
Yeah, but is it a more of a foundation or a
no? Actually, it won't be. It's going to be sort of guerrilla. I've decided I want to walk alone on this one. I looked into many years ago. I actually looked into making Koyama Press a nonprofit, but as I've said before, probably to you, I don't like people to be the boss of me. And so I don't want to answer to a board of directors about who I can give money to and who I can't, since it's my own money. It's not coming from the press or anything. And it never has come from the press. I wish I could say the press has made millions, but, that's small press comics. It ain't that. So it's a different animal, and I've decided to just do it personally. So it'll be pretty low-key.
Yeah. I had thought of setting up something similar. I think we talked about it a little at SPX last year, going into this year. But of course, now it's I've got to be a lot more careful about my reserves and everything going forward. I tried helping out one cartoonist who was not insulted, but immediately turned around and sent the money back to me. She's like, "Don't worry, my husband's job is still good. Everything's fine." I'm like, okay, just you sounded really desperate and just thought I would offer a little gift as a grant or something. But,
I have experienced that as well. The giving out of money, it sounds like a weird problem, but it takes so much energy because you almost have to convince people sometimes. People know me well enough, and I've been supporting the same people for 10 years now. And so I know generally who's in need, and I know who has a partner who has a straight job, as a lawyer or something where they haven't lost much income. So I know those people go to the bottom of the list when I reach out to people. But people, and I'm sure I would do this too, I think it's human nature to feel like you have to justify accepting a gift.
Yeah.
And so the back and forth about, I just am giving you grocery money and that's all, and there's no strings attached. And, I'm able to do this. I want to do it for as many people as I can. I have been able to do it for over 100 people now. But, just take it.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell me what you're going to do with it. You don't have to tell me why you need it. I know why you need it.
Well, the first just couple of people I did that with, it's been the long pause from the time I send to the time they reply, which with the first person, I was like, you could at least friggin' acknowledge. And then once he finally wrote, it was the incredibly shameful email that, oh my God, I can't believe you did this, Gil. This is, I can't, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, that's why it took you 5 days. Okay. And so now I understand it's really disconcerting to people, and I even wrote a big disclaimer beforehand, like this is not meant to imply this or this. This is not, something you need to pay back. But But yeah,
I have to say it every time. But, if you put yourself on the receiving end of it, though, you might also feel a bit of that. I know that I would.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my moment. Once I read that first reply back, I was like, yeah, I wasn't, I was thinking, but not totally thinking of what this stuff means. Because again, I'm used to operating in a business world in a lot of respects. And, artists who are spending all their time by themselves, they can get into their heads a little bit more than I do, which is pretty remarkable. But
giving
tell me
is
about
complicated.
Cons.
Cons.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you miss?
Well,
I know there's TCAF was the big one, but
that was going to be our swan song, our last huge show, and of course our homie show. So it means even more to us. The TCAF folks have been wonderful to me throughout the years, and I had a lot of fun stuff planned. So that sort of kiboshed an opportunity to move a lot of backlist also. So from a practical standpoint, I had at least 10 of the artists coming back to do signings, even though, they hadn't had a new book. We had stuff planned around that, and nobody said no of all the people I asked, which was pretty heartwarming. And so, that's not going to happen now, and I can't make it happen in a different form. You can't substitute, a virtual book launch with lining up and having your book signed and meeting and talking to Emily Carroll, Jesse Jacobs, Sue Kim, anybody. So there's no substitute for it. But of course, I feel badly for all the showrunners because there is, up to a year of hard work, often very little pay to the organizers. And for a lot of the crap that they take, they work hard,
I'm with you. I do a show for my pharma trade association every year. And, I early in this process, I told the conference committee, let's just do webinars. Let's not even try to schedule the hotel for this fall. I just don't think, even if people are doing business travel again, this is not the event they're going to go to. They've got a whole lot of catching up to do. But it's the same hotel where SPX is held. And when I read Warren talking in the Comics Journal about not officially canceling the event, et cetera, I'm like, I've signed contracts at that Marriott. I know that if he says they canceled early, he will be on the hook for certain liabilities. So we all know the show's not going to happen, but you can't officially say it's not going to happen until date X. So
I think another thing that people don't know in general is that the show organizers, they get a block of rooms at the hotel, which we all take advantage of at a discount from regular room rates. But if the show cancels, I think they're on the hook for some of that. I'm maybe
it
wrong.
Varies. And I do the same thing with our show at that hotel. It's a much smaller number of rooms.
Okay.
But we're on the hook for any rooms that don't sell.
Right.
There is the act of God stuff written into the contract. So there is the potential to get out from it. And the hotel has no incentive to screw the festival over, knowing that someday we'll be past this and the festival has to come back. So,
right.
But yeah, it's a bind that, like talking with the companies I work with, like these big pharma companies, there are so many aspects of life that we took for granted, like across the spectrum, business, work, life, and everything. And the idea that like in one day, pretty much, from the day we all, like you said, March 13th, right around there, everything changed. Like we lost all of these things that we used to do that were totally normal. You realize then how exceptional our lives all were, that we could do all this stuff, I guess. So you say you binge on movies and TV anyway. What do you find you're binging on during quarantine life?
Actually, I've tried to step away a little bit from spending too much time on screens. So I will admit, bought Animal Crossing for Switch to play in March, but I actually held off and only started this past weekend, which was a holiday weekend in Canada. So my concentration has been less than normal. Normally my concentration is probably not great anyway. So I haven't actually, this is embarrassing to admit, but I've had a real hard time reading.
That was me. My first full month. It took me to get focused, to feel like I could read more than a page or two at a time.
Yep. So I've actually got a few books lined up, but, I'm going to take small chunks at a time. It feels very weird not to be able to concentrate enough to read. I think that's the nature of the stress of the uncertainty for me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, is that more prose or comics that you're
both. Yeah, I want to read some new stuff. Andrew Woodrow Butcher, who runs Little Island, the kids' comic store, he lent me a novel called Tokyo Ueno Station by Yu Miri, Miri, and I've just started that, although it might be a super downer book, but anyway, it's interesting. And then I picked up this book called How to Do Nothing, subtitle Resisting the Attention Economy, because I am one of those people who lives on their phone, and I'd like to not live so much on my phone. That one's by Jenny Odell.
Yeah, I've seen that. I was going to say the title sounded familiar. That's something I'm also interested in. That was, gosh, I hate bringing him up again. It was one of my last exchanges with Tom Spurgeon was about a book on digital separation, basically, like how to not be on screen as much. And that was just 3 or 4 days before he died. But I remember looking it up and thinking, oh, that actually sounds pretty neat. And when I didn't hear back from him for a day or two, I thought that's part of what was going on.
Wow.
I turned out to be wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is a degree of even doing the show daily. Very recently, I started with, let me take Sundays off. I have one day that I'm not, and turning these around isn't that difficult. I've got a good process in place, but I realize having one day that I'm not just idly checking out the numbers for how that episode is doing, or pushing it on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, that sort of helps. I'll try and once we get a new equilibrium, figure out where to go from there. But do you find it's helping in those terms? Oh, sorry, go
on. Do I find what's helping?
The Jenny Odell book.
Oh, I've just started. I've just
Okay.
started, but I certainly like the idea of, divorcing myself a little bit from a screen. And, not the Pavlov thing response. Anytime it pings, you run to it, and it's not an emergency.
Yeah. Well, that's my one thing. I turn notifications off at the very beginning. The only things I get are texts, and I don't live a life where people are texting a lot. And even that, it pings my Apple Watch, and it's the reverse Pavlov. I flinch in anger whenever I get a text. It's a revulsion therapy, I guess, by having the watch. But you're about to ask me something, or you're about to say something.
I was going to ask you, how does Amy deal with you having a full-time gig, which has not stopped, but then also spending 6 days a week on the podcasts?
Well, the podcast stuff doesn't take up as much time as the single one a week was, weirdly enough, because I realize now I was spending a shit ton of time driving into New York, taking subways, going here, going there, just to do a single show. And I was playing it back, editing the whole thing, taking notes and all this stuff. For the dailies, I do none of that. I process the audio just to make sure I get rid of the echo and stuff. I write notes while we're talking, and I just turn it around, the next day. I don't put all of the heavy work into it, and I'm not doing all that time in transit. And I have a workflow I figured out. I get the show done by like 8 a.m. every morning.
Right. That's right. You're super early riser.
That's my thing. I'm like, I coffee and ice my knee, write a page in my journal, do the intro to the show and post that. And every other day go for a run and then post the webpage for the new episode. And then it's done. There's like no podcast work for the rest of the day outside of recording occasional conversations. But even these, it's a half hour here, half hour there. It's not, 3.5 hours with Jerry Moriarty up in Albany with a 3-hour drive each way, which I do one Sunday. Or the great one where I drove, I think 3+ hours to get Bill Griffith, another hour or two to record with Sandy McClatchy, the poet, in Stonington, Connecticut, and then driving home and thinking, this is my Sunday? I'm going to spend like 8 hours in the car, but I got to talk to a great poet and one of the greatest cartoonists around. So I guess on balance, this is how I should be spending my free time. But
doing those longer ones in person, the payoff for you is obviously seeing and talking face to face. But is the payoff worth it for all that extra time out of your life when you could be doing it this way remotely?
I think there's more. I'm dying that I can't sit across a table from someone and talk with them. So this is good, but it's limited. It's helpful that I've been doing these with people I've already recorded with in the past.
Sure.
I've done 2 with brand new people, and they've gone okay. One was a guy I've spoken to a few times before, but I'm going to have ones coming up where it's people I've never met, don't have any relationship with, and I hope to God, verbally we can form a rapport, because we can't look at each other and get the body language and understand the cues as to who's talking and how we don't interrupt each other, etc. But my thought, if there's ever a normal where it's okay to sit down and do this again in person, is maybe I could start balancing them. Maybe do 2 of those a month and a couple of voice only, a couple of remotes a month. Especially because there are guests who I'll never get to see in person for, various travel reasons. So there are already a couple who have said, well, if you're going to do this, we could finally have that podcast, since we're never actually going to sit down together. So,
Right.
So yeah, it'll change the show and what I do going forward. I'm glad that this is an option, but it's killing me that, Tom the Dancing Bug, Ruben Bowling, Ken Fisher, we've talked about getting together, and he's got 2 new collections coming out, and he's only 25 miles away in New York, but we're like, we can't.
Might as well be in Australia.
Yeah, we can't meet in person.
No.
But yeah, so it's different, but I'll adapt. And I've said this on the show before. If that's the biggest inconvenience I have to deal with through the pandemic, I'm getting by pretty easy, all things considered. So, but place you're looking to go, that would tell you we're past everything. Like, is there
I had actually planned.
Bar?
Oh yeah. Well, I like to go to take artists to restaurants, so I miss that really a lot. I do a lot of meetings in restaurants or coffee shops, more breakfast meetings, so I miss that a lot. But I also like to sit in a coffee shop by myself to do planning. There's too many distractions, whether it be at home or at my studio. I can't get the planning part done, so I prefer to go and sit in the back of a coffee shop somewhere where hopefully I won't see anyone I know for an hour, and I really miss that. Yeah, but further, I had a trip planned this fall to Japan to take my sister to thank her for all the hard work she's done. And I guess that's not happening. So it may not even happen for another year, I guess.
That was our very last trip. I
had
a member company. Yeah. And that was our thing. Amy and I, in recent weeks, we've been like, if that's the last trip we ever get, or we get to take for a long time, it's a pretty good note to end off on. We got treated fantastically, great hotels, great restaurants. We got to ride the bullet train, business class back and forth.
Wow.
It was the company really took care of us, and I had some good business meetings while I was there, which made it worth it too. But yeah, all things considered, we're like, that's pretty good.
Yeah, so, I miss seeing people.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you in contact with old friends?
Oh, yes. I check
more
in.
Than usual?
Yeah. There's a couple groups that I'm in that I check in on. But yes, I'm actually reaching out virtually every day to 1 or 2 people just to see how they're doing. And I'll admit my interest with the artists is more, can you eat? Do you have enough funds to eat? But then I do also want to know about their mental health. So
I like that your ulterior motive is, how can I be charitable?
That's
great that you have a sinister approach to doing good.
It's sort of a default for me by now, but it's, you could have worse ones, I suppose.
Definitely.
One weird thing is appreciating the mundane. I realize how much we live for the high points, like taking a trip or, looking forward to a nice restaurant meal. I don't actually go out for dinner a lot, so I do actually look forward to that really a lot. But, you come to appreciate the stuff that you have, or certainly I have, and look at it with new eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a restaurant in Toronto we're dying to go see again, but at the same time, I'd love to just go walk around like a mall in northern New Jersey and just do the banal stuff. Just walk into a bookstore or something. That'd be enough for me. But anyway, Annie, thanks for coming on. I hope within a year or so we'll be able I will be able to take you out to dinner at El Tenedor in Toronto.
I hope it's still there. There's,
I'm afraid to look.
They're closing every day. A lot of 30-year-old restaurants are deciding to pack it in. Who can blame them?
Our hope is that place could only seat like 20 people.
Yeah.
So maybe it was, keeping it tight enough that this isn't that huge a strain. But yeah, I'm filled with dread as to what these places will be like when we get back.
Fingers crossed. Anyway, thank you so much for inviting me on to catch up. I'm glad to hear that Thanks. you sound really good despite this time.
Yeah, I'm all things considered. Yeah, I'm keeping it together. So thanks a lot, Annie.
You're very welcome.
That was Annie Koyama. Go check out Koyama Press at its site, koyamapress.com. That's KOYAMAPRESS.com. She's also on Twitter as Annie Koyama, all one word. Annie is ANNIE. And on Instagram as Koyama Press. Oh, and you can hit bookshop.org/shop/Koyama Press for a whole ton of the press's books. There'll be links to this in the episode and show notes. So, and when she gets around to launching, if she does, an official site for her grant program, I'll publicize that. You should also, by the way, check out the Instagram feed of Koyama Press, because she has this Koyama Thanks feature where she just highlights artists, publishers, and other people who she just feels are helping make a difference. And I'm awfully glad there are people like Annie in the world, and I'm glad we got to sit down and talk in the before time. And that she made a little time for me now during all this craziness. And we'll be back tomorrow with another COVID check-in. If you want to send me a little update to read on the air or have something you want to share with the listeners, let me know and we'll set something up. I'm at groth18, GROTH18 at gmail.com. You can find my contact info at my websites, vmspod.com and chimeraobscura.com/VM. And you can find a link to the COVID-19 sessions at both sites with all of these daily episodes. You can always subscribe to the Virtual Memory Show via iTunes, Spotify, or whatever podcatcher you use by grabbing our RSS feed. And that way you can make sure you get every episode, and you can also go back and check out the archives. The information for all that is, again, VMSpod and chimeraobscura.com/VM. In the before time, I always recorded these shows in person, but nowadays I use Zencastr.com to record remotely. If you're interested in learning more about it, it's spelled Zencastr, so no final E for Zencastr.com. There's a free hobby level, but I use the pro level, which is $20 a month. That is a minor expense as far as this podcast goes, because I am no longer spending money on $12 to $15 at the George Washington Bridge for tolls, $30 or so for parking, $3 each way for subway trips, etc., for all of those New York City sessions I was doing, much less the ones where I drive all over the goddamn place. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is I appreciate the support I've gotten over the years from listeners, but don't give me any money right now. I am more than doing fine. My Patreon supporters more than cover what I'm doing. So if you can spare anything, go find the artists and writers you like. Go find their Patreons, Kickstarters, GoFundMes, Indiegogos, tip jars, whatever. Follow Annie's example of helping people, especially if they're creative people who you know are in need. Don't have to publicize it, but they sort of appreciate the help. And if you're not comfortable giving to individuals, you can always find worthy charities to give to. I recommend local food banks, given the again, maybe it's just local here in New Jersey, but given the need for those and the disruptions people have had in their lives, there are a lot of ways that you can help people in need. So if you're in a position to help. I am Gil Roth. It is Wednesday, May 27th, 2020, and this was a bonus episode of my Virtual Memories Show podcast. Thanks for listening. Keep the conversation going, stay safe, and wash your damn hands.